One feature that FL Studio users lack is integrated audio warping, like Ableton, that allows you to select transients and easily move them about without stretching the entire sample. Logic Pro has a similar feature with FlexTime, Bitwig has this too, a lot of DAWs have something like this. This is very handy for just readjusting a loop that might have some of the hits a little offbeat, for getting layered vocals to be more in time with each other, applying swing to a loop to make it have a more noticeable groove. There's a lot of good uses for it. While you can't do this in FL Studio, there are a few alternatives that are the next best thing in my opinion. I'm gonna show you 3 methods, and I may be biased, but I think method 2 is the best. But it needs the context of the first method to make more sense. The most basic way to approach this problem is to use resizing in combination with time stretching. If you hold down Shift plus left click and drag between 2 notes that are next to each other, you can resize both the left and right one at the same time. This is both really handy for changing the rhythm of chord progressions, but this also works for clips on the playlist. But that's not going to stretch an audio clip on its own. For that, you need to turn on the Stretch on Resizing button. You then drag the edge of an audio clip like you were going to resize it, and it stretches out. I didn't even know this was a thing for years. It's such a powerful tool, but it's hidden away behind this tab with a very faint symbol. There's a shortcut for it, but it only toggles it on or off, and I often forget it's even on and then accidentally warp a whole bunch of clips at once. That aside, with time stretching turned on, when you do that shift resizing 2 clips at the same time, then both of them will get stretched. But you can't just slice the same clip and stretch it, otherwise this happens. Because they're the same clip, they get the same stretching, so you need to make one unique. Then it will work. Except in this example, I'm using the entire clip. If I wanted to stretch just one section out of a larger clip, then I need to make sure the section that I'm stretching and the next section are both unique from the rest. This works, but it's a bit more work, and this is just for one stretch. If I wanted to do this at many different points in the sample, then I would have to do a lot more, like making clips unique. Also, each time you make a clip unique, it creates a new channel, which means it has to load in audio and perhaps restretch it. I do recommend the stretch algorithm in this case, but even so, loading in all these extra channels will make loading times a little longer. For small samples, it's not a big deal, but it becomes noticeable if you're doing this for samples the size of entire songs. That's where method 2 comes in, Jukeblocks. Not only does Jukeblocks generate song templates in various genres, with subscribers getting generated notes and randomized presets, it has an Ableton and FL Studio converter. This is my website. I made it. And just recently I added support for Ableton Warpmarkers to be fully converted to FL Studio. Previously, I would only calculate the first detected tempo, which would result in like inaccurate stretching for more complex samples that use a lot of warp markers. True warp markers don't exist in FL Studio, so to get around this problem, I treat each warp zone as its own individual sample. So they all get unique tempos, and then from there I just match up the clips. This was a challenge for sure, but I've seemed to have gotten it to work very accurately. I'm sure one of you will find a way to break it though, but let's take a look at some examples. I've discovered on this example that it's very easy to make clicks. Even when just chopping up a sample without making any additional changes, you can hear click here. Because the converter creates these cuts where the warp markers are, I recommend placing them on quiet areas or where the wave is close to 0 to avoid any clicks. Also, because each clip is already unique, you can stretch the existing clips without needing to make any unique, unless you want to add more. In Ableton, you can also sync multiple tracks of the same length at the same time, so this is very handy for multi-tracks. For people who want to do a lot of audio warping but still do the rest of their work in FL Studio, I think this is the best solution. There's just one obvious downside. It requires Ableton, although you can use the light version of Ableton. You also need Jukeblocks, which isn't a downside. That's just a benefit. That's just a bonus. But you do need an account. Free users have a limited amount of downloads per month, while subscribers can just convert to their heart's content. Method 3 is another way that doesn't require Ableton, but is really more of an editor. I'm talking about Newtime. The easiest way to use this would be to open its channel and right-click on the waveform, and then click the Open Time Warper, it opens it in the plugin Newtime. This will open a plugin on the master. You could open Newtime yourself and drag the sample onto it, but this is quicker. Then you can play the sample from inside Newtime, but I like to sync it to the project with this chain button, except it'll only play from bar 1. So if you right-click it and turn on Ignore Host Selection, then it will play from wherever a loop is. Plus, I like turning on Ignore Spacebar, so then when I press Spacebar, it plays the entire track and not just the sample on its own. Then you can add more of these markers, just like in Ableton. If you want to stretch the entire thing, you gotta click Ctrl+A to select them all and then stretch from the end. If there's some silence before the downbeat of a loop, you can right-click one of these markers to change the downbeat. You can also add a groove to the sample and see it update in real time. Not even Ableton does that. When you're done, you drag the sample back onto the playlist or click Add to Playlist. So really this is creating a new sample with the warp changes you made. If you want to make any more changes, then you need to go back to the plugin and create a new audio file again. And that is if you still have it in your project, because once you edit a new sample, it will override the old sample in the editor. If you don't want that to happen, then you'll need to manually add Newtime and drag in the sample yourself. This works, and if there's a surgical edit that you need to make, then this is fine for that. But personally, I don't really like the disconnect between the playlist and the editor. For small things, I'd probably just use method 1. And method 2 would be for if I don't really have a clear vision in mind, I just know I want to warp and stretch stuff until I'm happy with the result. And then I'll convert it back to FL Studio and start to add a beat or other synths to go along with it. Also, I already own Ableton, so for me to use it is no big extra deal. But for someone who doesn't own it and doesn't want to get another DAW, then this is definitely a good tool to know how to use and make use of. So there you have it, 3 ways of warping samples for FL Studio. The best we have at the moment, but FL Studio has really been killing it with updates as of recently, so who knows what they'll develop next. And hey, as I have your attention, Jukeblocks is looking pretty great. Oh, you're walking away? Well, I'll just talk to myself. Jukeblocks is doing better than ever. The chord progressions from note generation have rhythms now. It's just one of those things that instantly makes the template feel a lot more inspiring to work with. The converter has the ability to downgrade serum in case you've ever run into that issue where your serum is a little bit old and it can't open a newer preset, so it just defaults to the sawtooth. This will just downgrade that preset so that you can open it in an older version of serum. Then there's the AU to VST conversion. Mac users will often use audio unit plugins, but those can't ever be opened on Windows. So this is the solution to that. It takes the preset data inside the project file and then puts it into the VST2 version of that plugin. Unfortunately, every developer kind of has their own way of handling the audio unit data, so it requires a unique solution per developer. So not all plugins in the world work just yet with this. But if you want to see one added, please look at the information here and how you can help me do that. Both of these options can also be used when not converting the file to a different format. You can keep the same FLP or the same Ableton file as long as you just select keep same version, and then only serum or only the audio units will get affected. Okay, that's it. That was my biannual video. Goodbye.